The January 6th committee held its third hearing Thursday. It mainly focused on former President Donald Trump's efforts to pressure then Vice President Mike Pence to overturn the 2020 election. Now, we heard some powerful testimony from a conservative lawyer who warned that Trump and his allies present, quote, a clear and present danger in 2024. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane has the latest.
The riotous mob got within 40 feet of an evacuating Mike Pence on January 6th. Pence's lawyer, Greg Jacob, was with him.
I don't think I was aware that they were as close as that.
At least some willing to murder, according to the committee and an FBI informant.
The Proud Boys would have killed Mike Pence if given a chance.
The committee contended the mob was egged on by a tweet from Donald Trump saying Pence lacked courage.
The situation was already bad. And so it felt like he was pouring gasoline on the fire by tweeting that.
New images showed Pence hiding in an underground safe room. The committee also showed Trump in the Oval Office on the morning of January 6th when he put final pressure on Pence to block certification of the election in an explosive phone call.
The conversation was pretty heated. It was a different tone than I'd heard him take with the vice president before.
Ivanka Trump telling an aide what vulgarity he called the vice president.
Do you remember what she said her father called him?
The P word.
His aides say Pence never considered the scheme devised by California lawyer John Eastman to have the former vice president reject the electors and throw the election to Trump.
There is no justifiable basis to conclude that the vice president has that kind of authority.
The committee said even Trump's chief of staff and Eastman himself knew the plan was bogus and dangerous. Former White House lawyer Eric Hirschman said he warned Eastman.
You're saying that you believe the vice president, acting as president of the Senate, can be the sole decision maker as to, under your theory, who becomes the next president of the United States? And you said yes. And I said, are you out of your effing mind? I said, you're going to cause riots in the streets.
After the attack, Eastman emailed Rudy Giuliani asking to be considered for a pardon.
I assert my Fifth Amendment right against being compelled to be a witness against myself.
And when deposed by the committee this past December, Eastman took the Fifth more than 140 times. Conservative Judge Michael Ludig, an outside advisor to Pence, said the threat to democracy remains to this day.
Donald Trump and his allies and supporters are a clear and present danger.
A clear and present danger. Scott MacFarlane joins me now for more. Scott, former Republican Judge Michael Ludig, we just saw him there. He gave powerful testimony. He said if former President Trump had succeeded in overturning the election, it would have been the first constitutional crisis since the beginning of the Republic. Let's listen to part of what he said.
I would have laid my body across the road before I would have let the vice president overturn the 2020 election on the basis of that historical precedent.
So what would have happened if Pence had tried to overturn the 2020 election?
Well, according to the White House lawyer Eric Hirschman, who testified by deposition to this committee, excerpts of which were played today, there'd have been riots in the streets, that it wouldn't have been accepted by the American public to have the sitting vice president throw an election to the president, an election he hadn't won. Judge Ludig was the capstone to today's hearing. He had the final word, and he put a real exclamation point on things by painting that picture, Carter, of what would have happened and the ongoing kinetic threat to American democracy from 2021, saying this threat didn't end that day, this threat remains, and that future elections could be called into question, future attacks could happen based on what we saw January 6, 2021. Carter, he said, there are Trump supporters who would view what happened as a lesson learned and find ways to perfect their attack in the future. That is the words of a federal judge who is a conservative hero, a conservative firebrand. Carter, note, the hearings we've seen so far have included witnesses, all of them politically Republicans in the second and third hearings.
You know, the committee showed how Mr. Trump's efforts actually put his vice president's life at risk. You said at one point the mob was about 40 feet away. How much danger was Mike Pence really in?
We heard today from Mike Pence's counsel, Greg Jacob, at some length. And Jacob, who was with Pence rushing to safety that day, said they could hear, in his words, the din of the mob. It was audible. They did show a map and show some of the schematics of the Capitol to give you a sense of proximity. They were about 40 feet away from the vice president at one point. The vice president was ushered to an underground loading dock area for his own safety, where he remained and insisted he remain until they resumed counting of the votes. There was a detail mentioned by the committee that was part of a court filing from last January 2021, that we had previously reported on, but it was underscored by the committee that in the case of the accused Proud Boys seditious conspirators, the FBI said it has a witness, an informant, who said there were members of the Proud Boys who would have murdered Mike Pence if they'd gotten their hands on him that day. Just underscoring, Carter, the significant threat to the vice president during the riot.
Sounded like there were some scary moments that day for sure. We learned the committee, and this is interesting, is going to ask Ginny Thomas, wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, to come in for an interview. So what do you know about this, and what could we learn from her?
Particularly noteworthy for a sitting Supreme Court justice's spouse to be called to speak to a congressional committee investigating a possible conspiracy. She's in the orbit with many others around this man named John Eastman, who you heard about in the previous report. John Eastman, this California lawyer, otherwise obscure, got in Trump's ear, got access to the president in the 11th hour, and he knows Ginny Thomas. According to multiple reports, they'd exchanged messages. John Eastman is kind of the focal point of a lot of this because he was the one devising the scheme to overturn the election. Trump bought into it, or appeared to buy into it, on January 6th, pleading with Mike Pence to act on it. Ginny Thomas is in that same orbit. So everybody who circles around John Eastman gets on the radar of this January 6th committee, and there it is now, the wife of the longest-serving Associate Justice of the Supreme Court.
The picture's getting a lot clearer. Scott, talk to us about what the Justice Department is now asking from the committee.
This is particularly interesting because of timing, Carter. During the hearing itself, a letter was released by the D.C. federal court submitted by the Justice Department in a January 6th case. It's a letter from the Justice Department to the January 6th committee asking for copies of the transcripts from their depositions with all of their witnesses. The committee won't comment on that request, but the Justice Department in its letter says it needs those transcripts to prosecute more January 6th defendants. These two different investigations, the committee and the Justice Department, cannot collaborate. But the Justice Department wants those records, opening the door to the fact they may try to push further with some of the current defendants or charge new ones.
Scott MacFarlane, he's all over these hearings. Thanks for being with us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Carter.